everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. In this video, oh my gosh, we have so much to talk about. This is probably going to be a longer one, I don't know. We're going to take an even closer look at the number 17, President Nelson. There are some fascinating things about this last conference. We're going to look at it in more detail. There's fascinating things about President Nelson. There's fascinating things about temples and just, oh my gosh. It took me a little while to prepare this. We've kind of already touched on this before. I have a playlist called Symbolism. You should go check it out if you haven't already. Numbers are clearly important in the scriptures. They're important in Judaism. I think they're important in our church. We don't necessarily obsess over them in our church, but they are important. And there is kind of a LDS numerology, although we don't go into like really fine detail about it, and we don't obsess over it. But there's definitely something going on here with 17. So I'm going to explain what I mean. Some of this will be a repeat for some of you, but there's going to be new things in this that I don't think that we haven't talked about on the channel before. Well, especially with this last conference. So let's just get into it. Okay, I'm gonna have to lay the foundation first. Okay, and explain the significance of 17. First, to do that, we have to understand the importance of 7. So, okay, significant. This is from BYU, BYUstudies.byu. Significance of the number 7. Many numbers are imbued with significance in cultures of the ancient world, including the Hebrew culture. Quote, the symbolic significance of numbers, or gematria, is important in much Jewish writing. Gematria, you guys, I think I've brought this up before. Gematria is just where you assign numbers to letters. So like in English gematria, A would have a value of 1, B would have a value of 2, 3 would have a value of C, and so forth. Or vice versa, however you want to think of it. And this is something that they do. And there's calculators that you can use online, different websites where you can type in words. It'll tell you the gematria value and whatever. Okay, not least of these is the highly symbolic number 7. As Gordon McConnell has recognized, quote, the use of 7 and multiples in religious texts is a feature not only of the Old Testament, but also of the ancient world. In the literature of Ugarit epic, events often occur in 7-day cycles, with the climax on the 7th day. The literary and theological character of the account means that no firm answer can be given to the question as to what actually happened. Yet, it is by no means impossible that an actual event, remarkable in some way, might have come to be memorialized in this particular way. According to Udo Becker, quote, 7 is a particularly important number in Judaism. In the Bible, 7 often appears in positive as well as negative portents, yet also as an expression of totality. Okay? Totality. Of course, the earth was created in 7 days, right? The 7-day creative period. So, totality, completion, remember that. The Didier Collin observes that the ancient Jews and the first authors of the Bible felt that the number 7 symbolized a sense of perfection and completeness in the Holy Scriptures. Okay? Perfection, completeness. Perfection, completeness. That's how the 7 is viewed. I'm not going to read the rest of this because, as you can see, it's already highlighted. We read this entire thing in a previous video, but go see my playlist called Symbolism if you want more details. Okay, now let's just briefly touch on the number 10, which is basically very similar to 7 symbolically. The perfect number 10. This is also from BYU. This is scholarsarchive.byu.edu. 10 was a symbolic number in the ancient world, perhaps for obvious reasons, since humans normally have 10 fingers and toes. Normally. But the significance of the number 10 in Scripture runs deeper than mere happenstance. Both in the Bible and in the Book of Mormon, counting to 10 seems to serve as an important symbol of arriving at completion or perfection before God. Okay, so here you have two numbers, different numbers, both with the same symbolic meaning. Okay, so think about that, 7 and 10. And when you add them together, what do you get? You get 17. Now, we've talked about how, specifically in the book of Revelation, it seems that John, uh, the Revelator, he speaks in numerology. Okay, for example, 12 is the number of priesthood. It represents priesthood. It represents the 12 tribes of Israel. It represents the government of God. Priesthood. So, one way that they would express themselves back in those days is they would add numbers together that had certain meaning, or they would times it, right? Think about when Christ said, uh, you're not supposed to just forgive your fellow man 7 times, but 70 times 7. He wasn't literally meaning 490 times. He was symbolically speaking, you always forgive them. Always. Because the number is so huge, you just always forgive them. Same thing with John the Revelator. You take the number of the priesthood 12, you times it by 12, you get 144. And then to add even more emphasis to it, you times it by 1,000. Okay? And I've said this before. It's like, so looking at the last days and looking at missionary work and doing the work of the kingdom, bringing people into the church of the firstborn, we've read in detail different things about how that applies to temple work, temple workers, so on and so forth. So John trying to express himself in his own day context. It's like if he went to one of somebody in the church of his own day, and he's like, you have no idea what the future is going to be like. You think that, think about priesthood, and then times it by priesthood, and then times it by 1,000. That's what it's going to be like in the last days. And that is what it's like right now compared to back then. Back then, the church was very, 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 very small compared to what it is right now. And then the amount of priesthood that we have compared to back then, it would have been mind-blowing back in those days. So that's how they communicate. That's how they talk. Okay. So anyway, let's read just a little bit more about 10. Regarding the meaning of the number 10 in the biblical world, the widely published British scholar E.W. Bullinger concludes, 10 is one of the perfect numbers and signifies the perfection of divine order, commencing as it does an altogether new series of numbers. So, right, you got 1 through 10, so after that there's a new series. The first decade is the representative of the whole numeral system and originates in the system of calculation called decimals. Okay, I'm just going to stop right there. So you get it. Okay, 10 Commandments. Yeah, I don't want to go any further than that. Okay, so 10 and 7. So if symbolically you're trying to communicate an idea, like you're trying to be like, okay, there is going to be perfection and completeness. No, really. There's going to be perfection and completeness. One way that you could express that is saying, just think of it as 7 plus 10. So all around perfection and all around completeness. Now, think of that in terms of this last dispensation. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear that. That's my cat coughing up a hairball. Awesome. Okay. So, can you take the cat out of here, please? Yeah. Ruining my video. He's gonna go outside. Okay, so think of that in terms of this dispensation. Okay, I think that there's something special, very, 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 very special about President Nelson. I'm not saying anything for sure. I'm just saying that I think that he's special, and I'm about to show you why. First, let's look at some more about 17. 17, this is a list of prime numbers. Prime numbers are numbers that you can only divide by the number 1 and the number itself, right? So 9, for example, wouldn't be a prime number because you can divide it by 3 and 1 and itself. But 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, and 17, and so on, you can only divide by the number 1 and itself. Okay, so 17 is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th prime number. So that already kind of makes it a little bit special when you're looking at it in this context. So think about that. Okay, we've talked a lot about the year 2017. 2017, a lot of things happened. First of all, it was the Hebrew year 5777. Now, the Hebrew year typically starts in either September or October because that's when they change their date. In this particular case, it changed on October 3rd, 2016, but the majority of the year 5777 was during the year 2017 on the Gregorian calendar. Okay, so if you were to match them up together, 5777 would have mostly matched up with the year 2017. The Jews viewed this they did view it as a special year. Why? Because it has 3 sevens in the number of the year. That may seem silly to you, but it is perfectly sane and rational and significant to them. There were a lot of interesting things that happened in 2017. So it was our first full year having this man in office. Doesn't matter how you feel about him. It doesn't matter. He was something different, wasn't he? He was something different. Never had one like him. Probably never will again. And his name is Trump. I'm sure that you've heard this before. Think about the trumpets that are supposed to be sounded in the last days, right? We have different sets of trumpets. We have the one set that shows up in the book of Revelation. You have another 2 sets of trumpets that show up in Doctrine and Covenants. And they're associated with the end of the world. They're associated with the judgments of God, and also in Doctrine and Covenants, the different judgments of the different classes of mankind. So you have Trump, right? And I know that a lot of you already know this, but you have Trump, and then he picked a vice president whose last name is Pence. So Trump, Pence. Trump, Pence. Trumpets. It sounds like trumpets. Okay, 2017, we had this very, very strange object enter the solar system. It's the first time, I'm not saying it's the first time ever, but it's the first time that we, as a human race, have observed an object come from outside of the solar system. So, not only was it unique in that way, but it was a very strange shape. This is called a Oumuamua. I've done a video about this if you want all the details, and there are a lot of details about this. Go watch that video. Just type in a Oumuamua. Or go to my playlist called Signs in the Heavens. Okay, but this thing came from outside of our solar system. It had a very, very irregular shape they don't really even know what it is. They haven't been able to, this is of course not an actual photo. It says down here, artist concept. But the shape was very irregular. And then as it left the solar system, it actually accelerated. There's some scientists that have tried to come up with like different explanations as to why it accelerated. But it was so strange that this professor from Harvard, Avi Loeb, he thinks that it was an alien object. He really does. He thinks that it was an alien object of some sort. Anyway, I'm not going to go too far into that, but when we're thinking of signs in the heavens, it doesn't matter what this was, whether it was a natural occurrence, whether it was a alien craft of some sort, whether it was something else. This was some kind of sign in the heavens. It made big news. This is part of a collection of different signs in the heavens. I'm actually trying to keep track of that on my tracker. But this was very strange. And you know what it means in Hawaiian, Amuamua? It means messenger, or it also means the first in advance of, like a scout, the first in advance of, for example, like an army. So think about that. Think about that. That's really interesting. Of course, one of the biggest things that happened in 2017 was this. I just barely did a video about this, about the 2017 eclipse. The most fascinating thing about it, in my opinion, because we're Latter-day Saints, is that it had to be on this exact course right here. It could not have been several miles north or south. Otherwise, all the special sites, the church sites, would not have been in the path of totality. Go watch the previous video. But up here, the northernmost point, we have that's Jamesport. We have Adamondiaman, which barely fell inside the path of totality. Again, if it would have been just several miles south, this would not have happened. And then at the very southern edge, um, Independence, Missouri. Zion, New Jerusalem. It barely was within the path of totality. So, because of the precision of the path, this, I think, definitely means something. It's so statistically improbable. And then take that in conjunction with the one coming up in 2024 that goes over other church sites, and it has to take a very specific path to do that. This is definitely a sign. Okay. Anyway, we had this happen, right, in 2017. So another occurrence in 2017. What else? 2017 was the last year of the last full year of President Monson's life. He passed away. I can't remember if it was like the 2nd of January, 2018, but it's like right at the turn of the year, going from 2017 to 2018. We had a changing of the guard from President Monson to President Nelson. And I don't need to tell you uh, all the different things that's happened during his presidency. Now, again, I want to remind everybody, because Elder Bednar said that just because a lot of changes didn't happen during his time, there were a few. He announced the Rome Temple. It was under his presidency that the missionary age was lowered, so like a hastening. But Elder Benner said that when revelation is received, it's not like it's implemented right away. Sometimes it takes years, sometimes it takes decades. So there was probably a lot of what we're seeing right now that was planned or in the works with President Nelson. We just didn't see it until President Nelson was prophet. So, but the fact of the matter is that he became prophet, and we've seen all these different things happen in the church. Just a whole it's been referred to as a blizzard of changes, like each change being a snowflake, and this whole thing has been a blizzard. So don't forget everything that's happened. We're no longer participating in scouts anymore, right? At least in the United States. I don't know how many other countries participated in scouts in the church, but that was a huge change. We've had what I'm not going to try and list them all here, but surely I can remember another one. Oh yeah, we went from 3-hour to 2-hour church. We have Come Follow Me that came. There's like a whole bunch of things, right? Anyway, but that's not the point. Okay, now let's start talking. Let's start focusing in on President Nelson. Something that's really interesting is that, okay, so this conference, right? His last talk was called "Now is the Time." Remember, instead of putting a question mark here, we put an exclamation point. Now is the time. And he shared this poem right here, which is by Henry Van Dyke. It's called "The Sundial at Wells College." Okay? And it has to do with time. It has to do with you can't control the past. The past is over. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. The only thing that you can do is act now. Now is the time that you do things. So he shared this poem, this conference. Okay, we're in 2022 right now. 17 years ago, 17 years ago, he shared that very same poem right here. And look at the title of the talk. This is back in 2005. This was April conference. So we've gone from April conference of 2005 to April conference of 2022, 17 years apart. This one's called Now is the Time to Prepare. And the one this year is called Now is the Time. Just simply Now is the Time. Back then, Now is the Time to Prepare. Now it's just Now is the Time. Another interesting thing about this is, okay, so in this talk, he says something kind of interesting before he reads the poem. He says, some people live as if there were no day of reckoning, right? The title of his talk, Now is the Time to Prepare, because there is going to be a day of reckoning. Of course, everyone faces a day of reckoning when they die and then at the final judgment, but there's like a kind of a really big final reckoning, or like a reckoning day that's coming for those that are living a telestial law. It's called the Second Coming, and the earth is going to be cleansed of all the wicked. So, and he in this talk, he quotes a lot of Second Coming scriptures. You have D&C 88 right here. You have Malachi, right, talking about the day of vengeance and burning, talking about the Second Coming. There was also 1 Corinthians 15, 50 through 54, that talks about being translated and quickened at the same time that there's the resurrection. There's a lot of 3rd Nephi. 3rd Nephi is a foreshadowing, basically, of the Second Coming and the millennium. So anyway, there's a fair amount of Second Coming stuff here. Look, here's another D&C 88. D&C 88 is a huge section that has to do with the Second Coming. Anyway, so he says that, and then he says, others waste today's time with a disabling fear of tomorrow. And that's perfect, because I just did that video talking about people who spread fear. It's okay to like observe what's happening, but sometimes it goes beyond that, and you're just, instead of observing things, you're scaring people, and you're scaring yourself about what's going to happen tomorrow. Oh no, famine, pestilence, war. You guys, it's happening right now as we speak. And yeah, it may affect you, but if you're living righteously, don't fear. You'll get through it. It's meant to be a thing to get the wicked to wake up out of their slumber. It's not so much, oh, you're a bad person, you deserve punishment. It's, hey, you guys, time is almost up. Pay attention. I'm destroying your house with a tornado. You're kind of hungry right now, right? Because food is hard to find. Maybe you need to start relying more on God. That's what it's for. So being a righteous person, yeah, it'll suck having to go through those things, but it's not something to like fear, and certainly not to have disabling fear, right? And then, or paralyzing preoccupation over mistakes of yesterday. Just repent and move forward. That's it. Each of us might well heed the words of a poet as posted on a sundial. And let me just read it. It says, the shadow by my finger cast divides the future from the past. Before it sleeps the unborn hour, in darkness and beyond thy power. Behind its unreturning line, the vanished hour, no longer thine. 1 hour alone is in thy hands, the now. And he puts now in all caps. I don't know if that's how it is in the poem, but the now on which the shadow stands. Okay. Interesting, because that's footnote 14, which is 7 plus 7. Anyway, so one thing that I noticed, because I wanted to like try and find out if there were any other details about this person that wrote the poem, and I didn't really find anything. He was a Presbyterian, and if I remember right, he was like a preacher in the Presbyterian church. He's done a few poems that have to do with time. which is interesting. Now, in this talk in 2005, he quotes out of this book, The Poems of Henry Van Dyke, 1911. So you can actually find this on Google Books. And you can see here's the poem right here, the Sundial at Wells College on page 345. And it's not the end of the book. It's it's toward somewhere toward the middle. But then, for some reason, this conference, April 2022, he quotes the same poem, but he quotes it out of a different book. This time, even though it's the same exact poem, he quotes it out of Music and Other Poems. So I looked that up. That's also here on Google Books. By the way, all these links will be in the description below. And it turns out that in this book, that poem is the very last poem of the book. It's the last one. As though to emphasize that no, this really is it. Now is the time. Oh yeah, and look at this. In the poem it is all caps. The now is capitalized, all caps. So, I don't know, it's just a little detail, but it's interesting that 17 years apart he quotes the same poem. The first time he quotes it from one book, the second time he quotes it from another book, but this time it's the last poem. After this poem, nothing else. Nothing else. So it's just an interesting thing. Now, we talked about how in a recent video, I can't remember if it was the last video, I think it was, we were talking about, yeah, it was the last video, we were talking about President Hinckley and reaching the goal of having 100 temples by the end of the year 2000. By the way, that's interesting. Something I forgot to mention is that many of you probably already know that the year 2000 wasn't really the change of the millennium, strictly speaking, because there was no year 0, right? So if you were to go back in time, it would go from 1 BC to 1 AD. So as soon as you reach, okay, so on New Year's Day, the first year, okay, year 1, a year later, okay, so 1 year going by would actually be the year 2, right? So the year 2 is actually the completion of the first year. So you bring that to the year 2000, well, that would be the last year before you hit 1,000 years. You hit 2,000 years. You hit 2,000 years since the year 1 in the year 2021. So I find that interesting that President Hinckley wanted 100 temples before the 2,000 years were up. That's like one way to think about it, right? Anyway, so what happened is they did that. They met the goal. In fact, they had 102 temples by that time. And a few years later, this very same conference where at the time Elder Nelson shares this poem and this talk called "Now is the Time to Prepare." At that same time, you have at the time Elder Henry B. Eyring, and this is one of the only times in General Conference that you hear the term "time running out." Remember right here the tracker. Sorry, let's go over here. Okay, time running out or running out. Let's go down here to the year 1942, and then you can see it's just white space, white space, white space. It's just never said. It's never said. And then you have this time by President Eyring, or at the time Elder Eyring. And then the only other time is in 2019 by President Nelson. So remember, they had met the goal by the end of the year 2000. A few years go by, and then Elder Eyring seems to be giving us kind of a warning, because he's talking about Elijah and the prophecy of Malachi, right? That the ceilings, that the sealing power needs to return to the earth in the last days. And in the middle of reading through that, or after reading that, he says, some of those words are crucial to understand. The great and dreadful day of the Lord is the end of the world. Jehovah, the Messiah, will come in glory. The wicked will all be destroyed. We live in the last days. Time could be running out for us to do what we have promised to do. Now, I would be interested to know, going back to the year 2005, they build all these temples, something that had never happened before, like so many temples being built at the same time. Um, I would like to know back then, you know, I'm sure they were observing temple attendance, and was it at the level that they wanted it to be? What was it lower than what they were hoping? And they talked about it. And then did President Eyring, or Elder Eyring, was he like, you know what, maybe I should bring this up in conference that, hey, we built these temples for a reason. Maybe time's running out. Maybe you should think about getting to the temple and make use of these new temples that we just built. Now, I don't know that speculation, but I find it interesting that he's saying that just 5 years later. So, excuse me. So he says that, um, and then, okay, now where do I want to take it now? Well, let's go to the second time that that's brought up. Okay, so again, remember, 17 years ago, Elder Eyring, Elder Nelson, 17 years ago, that this happens in the very same conference. Very interesting. And could that be what Elder Nelson at the time, why he was giving this talk? Now is the time to prepare. Now is the time to do temple work. Now is the, don't wait. Do what you need to do now. Uh, he talks a lot about death in this, right? Um, the heading of this says, now's the time to prepare to meet God. Tomorrow may be too late. He talks about Dancel, his first wife, and how she passed away, and just talking about how things could happen at any time. And so now's the time to do what we need to do. At the end here, he says, brothers and sisters, we live to die, and we die to live in another realm. If we are well prepared, death brings no terror. From an eternal perspective, death is premature only for those who have not prepared to meet God. So again, he's talking about people dying prematurely, just in general. That's always happened throughout the whole history of the earth. But there's also, he also, like I said, he brings up a whole lot of second coming scriptures here. And we know that, well, for everyone that's living in telestial law right now, they're not prepared to meet God. God is coming. To Jesus Christ, He is coming, and it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good. Okay, so let's see. What should we do now? Now's the time. There's the. Let's talk really quick about this talk. Come follow me. Well, first, okay. So what I did, I added up the number of times that President Nelson has talked. Okay. Several months ago, we had the Kansas, Oklahoma area member devotional, which seems to be part of a series. The only ones that I'm aware of that are part of this series is the Kansas, Oklahoma, and then the European one, and then they had one for California. If you guys find out about any other ones, please let me know. Send me the link, because I like to watch them and then take notes and then do a video about them. So anyway, when she was talking to us here in Kansas and Oklahoma, she told us to read, at that point, he had spoken 31 times. Was it 31 times? Yeah, like 30. Yeah, she said 31. I think it was 31.
You didn't say Sister Nelson because you didn't say her name.
Oh, Sister Nelson. Sorry, Sister Nelson She told us to go back and read all 31 of his talks and then go back and read them again, like the 31 since he became president of the church. She has basically given us a really helpful hint, like, hey, you may really want to listen to what he's saying because he's talking about the second coming and that we need to prepare, and now's the time. So I actually started a series where I was doing that, which I have not completed yet, but I have a playlist that's uh, attempting to do that. What I noticed as I was doing that is that, okay, so his first conference, April 2018, he spoke 5 times. The next conference, he spoke 4 times. The next conference, 3 times. The next conference, 4 times. The next conference, 5 times. If you're listening, you may want to look at the screen because this will help um, explain what I'm trying to communicate here. So I noticed that there was this pattern, right? 5, 4, 3, 4, 5. Almost like chiasmus, like chiasmus. That's like a kind of like a Hebrew way, poetic way of writing, where um, in the middle of the chiasmus, that's like the main point that the writer is trying to communicate. So it's like a mirror type thing. You know what I'm saying? And so I wondered, wow, what is there something in the middle of that? Was he doing this on purpose, or was he just kind of inspired to, do these talks, not really aware what was going on per se, and then the Lord just kind of directed it in such a way that the middle was the most important point? Well, I think so. The reason why is because when you go to April 2019, it brings you to this talk. This is the middle talk. Come follow me. And this is the talk where he talks about the Paradise, California fire that happened. Okay, so kind of a scene like you might expect at the end of the world when the world is burned, and he even includes a picture of it. Okay, so here's a area that was devastated by fire, and by the way, almost the entire town was destroyed by fire. So that's why this was a big story. So he shows us this picture, and then at the very end of the talk, which is usually where the best stuff is, or the main point of the talk, or the main emphasis, he says, "Now, as president of his church, I plead with you who have distanced yourselves from the church, and with you who have not really sought to know that the Savior's church has been restored, do the spiritual work to find out for yourselves, and please do it now. Time is running out." This is the middle of this. Okay? So, whether he intentionally did it or whether the Lord kind of inspired him to do this number of talks, I don't know, but that's rather fascinating. And by the way, this talk, okay, come follow me, time is running out. This is the only other time that we see time running out on this tracker. The first time was the one that we already covered by President Eyring in 2005, and the only other time that that's ever said in General Conference is in this talk. Come follow me, 2019. Time is running out. Oh, and look over here, the column next to it, prepare the world, in all red, deep red. So, I find that rather fascinating. It feels too perfect. It feels too perfect. So, anyway, so there's that. Let's come back over here. So I was wondering how many times has President Nelson talked as of this last conference, because I was entertaining the idea, or just kind of thinking about the idea, like, what if this was the last normal general conference, or what if things change after this? What if we have Adamondite Amen, or what if something happens, right? I wasn't saying that for sure that's going to be the last General Conference, and I expect General Conference to continue into the millennium. I don't know what format it's going to take, but it's going to continue in some form. So anyway, I added it up. I put this on So I have all these tabs down here, and if you guys ever want to look at this spreadsheet that I've done, this workbook, the link is in the description below, so you can look at this at any time. So it turns out that as of right now, he's spoken 35 times total. However, one of these talks isn't really a talk, okay? And the one that I'm talking about is this one, the Hosanna shout. Okay, this is the one of the ones that I counted. In this, he kind of explains a little bit about the history, and then he just explains how to do it, and that's it. So it's not really a talk. It's an instructional point in the general conference. So if you take that out, then what you have is 34. And what is 34? Well, 34 is 17 plus 17. So he's spoken 17 plus 17 times since he became prophet. And in his last talk, which blows me away, it just absolutely blows me away. He says, now is the time. So he repeats himself. He repeats himself from 17 years earlier. The title of the talk is very similar, only instead of having the word prepare, because maybe the time to prepare is over at this point, instead of having that, now it's just called Now is the Time. He repeats the poem. He repeats it from a different book. In this book, this time, it's the very last poem of the book. And then what he does is he announces 17 temples. 17 temples. He announces 17 temples to complete 100. So 17 is already a number that's just dripping in perfection and completeness. And then he uses that number to complete 100 temples. And we talked about in the last video how President Hinckley, he only announced 73. His goal was not to construct 100. His was to complete 100 by the end of the year 2000. And then President Nelson by himself, and it seems like this was probably a goal. I'm assuming that it might be wrong, but the fact that he made it to an even 100, I feel like that indicates that that was probably a goal. Maybe at the beginning of his presidency, I don't know. But whatever the case, he is now at an even 100 temples that have been announced, and he completed it with the announcement of 17 temples. But it doesn't end there. It doesn't end there. I was looking at this list of temples. 3 of these are actually special for me, by the way. This is just a side note. One for me is the Spain Barcelona temple, because that's where I served my mission. So I find it incredible for myself that there's a temple going there, which is awesome. We have the Austin, Texas temple, which would have been the closest temple to me when I served in the Army, because I was stationed at Fort Hood, which is just an hour from Austin. So we got my mission temple, military temple, and then I currently live about an hour away from Wichita. So this is going to become my temple whenever it's constructed, and I hope it's soon. So it was a really special bunch of announcements for me. Anyway, I was looking at the last temple because sometimes they reserve the more important, or like, for example, when President Monson announced the Rome, Italy temple, he saved that one for last. And it is viewed as a very special temple. So I was wondering, is there anything special about Modesto, California? Like, was there any sort of order to this? Why was that one saved for last for some reason? Well, I looked I couldn't find anything like special about Modesto as far as like church history goes or anything like that. But I looked at the state of California, and if you add up these temples, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 temples. So in the state of California, uh, President Nelson has brought it to completion or perfection, so to speak, if you want to look at it that way, as far as the number of temples. And that's not to say that there won't be more temples in the future in California, but I find that interesting that the Modesto, California temple completes 10 for California. And then you'll remember, I just said that he announced one in Texas. And when you go to Texas, how many does Texas have now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 for Texas. So another number of perfection and completion. So 7 for Texas, 10 for California. What does that up to? 17. 17. So he completes 100 with 17. He completes 10 in California and 7 in Texas. Okay. That's fascinating. And then in this talk, so you could say that this is his 34th talk that he does this. So 17 plus 17, his 34th talk. He does that, and then he ends it. He ends it with this quote. And this is from Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 22. Ye shall be my people, and I will be your God. Oh, sorry. Before that, he says, may we be a people worthy of the Lord, who said, ye shall be my people, and I will be your God. I brought this up before, but let's do it again. Pull it up. What's the context of this? I'll tell you. Chapter heading. In the last days, oh, that's us, Judah and Israel will be gathered to their own lands. David, their king, Messiah, will reign over them. So, Christ is about to come to earth. He's about to become the king of the world. We will have our first experience with him at Adam-on-Diamond, presumably, from my understanding of it at the moment. And so President Nelson chooses to end his talk, and that's, by the way, that's after, let's see, let's go here. Let's see, sorry. That's after he gives a talk called Spiritual Momentum. Here it is, Spiritual Momentum. Oh, by the way, that talk is 17 minutes and 17 seconds long. And it's been noted, I've done a video about this because Andrew Lamb, who is a seminary teacher, he was talking about how these 5 points, these 5 things that he wants us to do, how they match up really nicely with the story of Moses preparing Israel to meet God at Mount Sinai. And that's where Israel becomes the Lord's covenant people as like a nation, as a people. That we've talked about how that was essentially the betrothal event. So it's like this whole time since Sinai until now, the church, the covenant people have been betrothed to the Lord, which is like, it's like engagement, but in with like Jewish tradition, it's like much more serious than just regular engagement. It's just as good as being married without being married. So that was the betrothal, and then I'm assuming at Adam-on-Diamond, but definitely at the second coming, that's when the actual marriage will take place. That's why we have parables like the 10 virgins, or the king who invited all these different people to a marriage feast, but no one would come, and so he invited strangers. That's why there's all this like marriage imagery that goes into the second coming, right? So Andrew Lamb had pointed out how these 5 things in this talk match up pretty well with the story of Moses preparing Israel to become betrothed to the Lord. And now we have President Nelson, the 17th prophet of the church. Oh yeah, by the way, he's the 17th prophet in this dispensation, who seems to be preparing us to meet God, to meet the Lord. Very possibly, excuse me, very possibly at Adamondayaman. And so, in his talk, his very last talk, his 34th talk, where he completes 100 temples, he says, now think about it as though he's like, okay, here we go. I hope we're ready. Think about it in those terms, because that may have been his frame of mind. Okay, may we be a people worthy of the Lord, who said, ye shall be my people, and I will be your God. So, is anything going to happen between now and next conference? I don't know. Could Adamondayaman happen? Yeah, of course it could. I don't know that it will. I'm not saying that it will, but it could. And that would kind of make all this make sense. Again, it seems that President Hinckley wanted to have 100 temples by the end of the 2,000 years. Sorry, my throat is getting dry. It seemed like President Hinckley wanted 100 temples by the end of the 2,000 years. And now it seems like President Nelson wanted 100 temples announced by right now. I don't know. I don't know if that means that something's about to happen. It could. We have a crazy war going on right now in Ukraine and Russia, which I didn't think would happen. It seems like it could escalate. I'm taking it seriously. I hope you are too. We'll just have to wait and see what happens with it. But a lot of things have been going on since 2017. And in 2020, there was a huge uptick in craziness in the world. Craziness with the pandemic. Craziness in society, in politics. Craziness in nature. It's astounding. It's astounding what's happening right now. Okay, so what else? What else? Oh yeah, by the way, so as of right now, and as of the time of the April 2022 conference, guess how many temples we had in operation? 170. 170. There's a 17 in that. 170. And that temple was dedicated on the 7th of November. So that's kind of interesting, isn't it? It's too much. It's too much. I've pointed this out before. If you go either to Facebook or to Twitter and you look at any of the general authorities' accounts, well, not general authorities. If you look at any of the First Presidency or Quorum of the 12, their accounts, they're all following 17 accounts, right? They're all following each other, as well as the church account and what else? ComingToChrist.org and the Tabernacle Choir. All that added up is 17 accounts that they're following. Okay, all of them are doing it because these are their official accounts. Let me go back to President Nelson. When was his last post? Oh, it was on the 17th of April. And we have a picture of Christ. And of course, the 17th, that was Easter. It was also first fruits. So that's why he did it. But it's pretty fitting, don't you think, for what's happening this year? Okay. So let's come over here. I did this thing where I wanted to know, have they said a lot of like 17 or anything in conference? I like to look these things up in the Scripture Citation Index. Well, I decided to do a search for the word 17. I didn't care what the context was. They could have been telling a story about a 17-year-old. They could have been talking about, 17 years ago this happened. I didn't care about the context. I just wanted to do a raw count of how many times the word 17 shows up in General Conference. So here you can see it's shown up 2 years in a row in the year 2020 and 2021. We have one back in 2013. So you can see that there's not a whole lot, right? There's just like a bunch of white space, like only 3 times since 2003, only 3 times. But then when you go back in time, here's a cluster here at the turn of the millennium, and then oops, here's a whole lot in the early 90s. For some reason, it was mentioned 9 times in 1993, and then 5 times the year after that. And then, look, it's like mentioned every single year from 1991 all the way back to 1975. And just like, for some reason, just like all other Second Coming terms, there is almost always a large cluster, a high frequency of Second Coming terms used in the 70s. And it's happening here with the word 17. Something that you wouldn't normally associate with the Second Coming, but why is it following that pattern? Why is it following that pattern? Why, just like other Second Coming terms, is the word 17 clustering? Why is there an uptick in the 70s? Then you go back in time, it's mentioned like all the time, even all the way back to the 40s. The 40s, it's usually hardly ever used, like Second Coming words and phrases. But from 1943 all the way until like 1995, almost every single year the word 17 shows up in General Conference, with just a few exceptions. Just a few exceptions. So it actually comes up quite a bit historically. It's frequently said. And then, for some reason, there's a big cluster in the 70s. Then you have another pretty big cluster in the early 90s. And then after that, it just kind of disappears mysteriously. It just kind of disappears. And then it pops up 2 times in a row in 2020 and 2021 of all the years. Of all the years. How do you explain that? What does it mean? It means something, because if you look at this, what we're seeing right here, this looks like this is normal. This is just, a pretty even distribution, right? Just normal. But then suddenly it just stops. What happened? What happened? Why did we stop using it all of a sudden? You use it when you're talking about somebody's age, length of time, minutes, hours, weeks, months, years. Why all of a sudden do we stop talking about 17? And then mysteriously bring it up in 2020 and 2021. Well, let's see. Let's think about that one for a little bit. Okay, here's an article on the church website. It's called 17 New Missions Created. 17 New Missions Created. And guess what year this came out? 1993. What? What was happening in 1993? For some reason, 1993 was a record-breaking year for the word 17. Well, aren't they just talking about how they created 17 new missions? Nope, they're not. And I'll show you right here. Okay, let's go to the first one. Years ago, as a young missionary, I was assigned to a group of 17 small islands. Nope, 1993. After 17 and a half years, I want you to know, blah, 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 blah. One day, when I was 17 years old, blah, 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 blah. Maria Kodge was 17 years old, blah, 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 blah. When I was 17 years old, blah, 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 blah. When I was 17, blah, 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 I joined the Utah National Guard. Oh, that's Dallin H. Oaks. I didn't know he was in the National Guard. I said, well, send number 17. It might do the job. That's by Thomas S. Monson. 16 going on 17 from The Sound of Music. One day, when I was 17 years of age, da 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 da. That's how they're using it in 1993. All of a sudden, everyone starts talking about when they were 17, or 17 might do the job. And that same year, 1993, the record-breaking year for 17, they announce 17 new missions. Just randomly, the record-breaking year for the word 17, they announce 17 new missions. What missions are they? Brazil, California, Canada, Colorado, Guatemala, Latvia, Nebraska, New York, Peru, Romania, Russia, and Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine. The Russia Samara mission and the Ukraine Donetsk mission. And as you know, this is currently the hotspot. This is what's being, officially on the surface. This is what's being fought over. Luhansk and Donetsk. Okay? So, the year that the number 17 comes up the most in General Conference, they create 17 new missions, one of which is in Russia, one of which is in Ukraine, and specifically the Donetsk mission. Okay, sure. Okay, what else do we have? Let's look at the Relief Society. The first Relief Society president was Emma Smith, and she started on March 17th. March 17th. That was the day that we had our first Relief Society president. Which Relief Society president are we on right now? The 17th. Right now it's the 17th Relief Society president. And she started in 2017. So our 17th president started in 2017. Now, she is going to be replaced by, where is it? On August 1st, she's going to be replaced by President Camille N. Johnson, because right now it's Jean B. Bingham. Okay, so we do have the 18th that is incoming on August 1st, but it's still interesting. I don't know if historically they've kind of matched up the Relief Society presidents with the prophets, and that's why you have 17. I don't know. I haven't compared dates or anything like that, but anyway, that's it's kind of interesting. So what else was 17? Well, in 2017 and the years that followed, specifically starting, I think it was I don't know if it was October or November of 2017. I'm not going to say it out loud, but just look at the screen. Many of you know about this right here. Okay, this thing that was happening, and I'm not going to make any commentary about it. That's not what the channel is about. Okay, but I am very aware, very, very aware of this. And one thing that they started doing is this became very, very not okay to talk about on social media, so people had to start referring to it. Well, I think in its posts itself, it made mention of the fact that it is 17. Right? Remember gematria? A is 1, B is 2, C is 3. Well, this right here, this that I'm pointing at, this is 17. This is 17. And it had a lot to do with, basically about the end of something, and kind of the end game, so to speak. I don't. Okay, I'm not gonna make any more commentary than that. But you had this big thing that was going on that's associated with the number 17. Uh, what else do we have? What else do we have? This is from the Phoenix Enigma. This is a guy that I used to watch all the time. He is no longer on YouTube, really. Last I checked, he's mostly on BitChute. But he has a website. It's a guy from Phoenix, and I think he's pretty good. I think he's pretty good. He has a website. He does a lot of like numerology things, and I just wanted to highlight a few things. So, in the Bible, the number 17 symbolizes overcoming the enemy and complete victory, which I can't substantiate that right now. I feel like his work is really good, but just take that with a grain of salt. But that's kind of interesting. And then he says, according to Abellio, the number 17 is the number of the Son of Man, which, again, I can't verify that myself. I probably shouldn't even be sharing this right now, but that's just something to keep in mind. There's a few other things. Jesus Christ gained a complete victory over death when God resurrected him near sunset on Nisan 17. Now, actually, it would have been it would have been on uh, the 16th of Nisan because that's first fruits. But the next day after his resurrection was the 17th, which that's interesting because the 17th would have been his first full day of being resurrected, right? So he was resurrected, from my understanding, for part of the day on the 16th. I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't know. But the next day, the first full day of him being in a resurrected state was the 17th. So that's interesting. And we know that there's been a big emphasis lately in the church, focusing in on the fact that Christ is resurrected. The church symbol changed to the resurrected Christ. They emphasize it time and time and time again that he is resurrected. And that's a big deal because when we meet him, whether it's at Adam Diamond or whatever, we're going to be interacting with, watching, listening to the resurrected Christ. So, okay, now this is interesting right here. God began to flood the earth through rain on the 17th of the second Hebrew month. So, the flood at the time of Noah, that corresponds and it's related to the baptism of fire that's going to happen to the earth when Christ comes, right? The earth is going to have its baptism of fire, receive the Holy Ghost. The wicked are going to be cleansed off the earth. Well, the 17th was when the flood happened. It happened on the 17th. Interesting. The end of the world back in those days, it was a end of the world for everyone that was living other than Noah and his family. The end of the world was on the 17th. Noah's Ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, altitude of 17,000 feet. I can't verify that, but I'll just take his word for it. On the 17th of the 7th month, exactly midway through the holy period known as the Feast of Tabernacles. So the earth was essentially destroyed starting on the 17th, and then this kind of ended, so to speak, with the ark resting on Ararat on the 17th of the 7th month. Joseph, the original Joseph, was 17 years old when he was sold by his brothers and taken to Egypt. So one way to view that is that, he had his first 17 years of life just living life, and then his mission started, or the purpose of his life, or the purpose that the Lord had for him in saving Israel started at that time, right? When he was 17. Just a few more things. There's a bunch of stuff here, but I'll skip that. The age 17. In most countries across the world, 17 is the last age at which one is considered a minor under the law. So think about that with us in this dispensation in the church. Are we growing up? Are we moving on to this next more complete phase when the second coming happens? Right? It's no longer growing. It's more of an adult at that point. In the U.S., the age at which one can enlist in the armed forces with parental consent is 17. And that's kind of interesting because President Nelson is the one that introduced the Lord's Youth Battalion, which is, military imagery, and he's the 17th prophet. Okay, that's pretty much from that. That's pretty much it from that. There's this article. I can't remember. I think that I at least read some of this in a video. I can't even remember at this point, but here's an article on the church website called 17 Centuries of Christianity. And that's interesting too, isn't it? Because those 17 centuries, you can think of that as a time of completeness. Even though it's not perfection, it's the completeness of the apostasy before the church is restored. You could say that we're still in apostasy right now. Not us, but the rest of the world. But a world of complete apostasy without the church, 17 centuries. And then, after that, we have the restoration. So, could it be, again, with President Nelson, we have 17 prophets, completion, perfection, and then after that, we move on to something new, the second coming? Don't know. Over here, okay, this is 1982. 17 historical sites dedicated in Nauvoo. And President Hinckley was part of that. On this date, President Hinckley, counselor in the first presidency, dedicated what may well be a record 17 historical sites, all located in Nauvoo. Interesting. Okay, so I think that may have been it. Yeah, so 34 talks, if you don't count the Hosanna shout instruction. 17 plus 17 talks. 17 temples to complete 100. We currently have 170 temples in the church at the time of that announcement. President Nelson is the 17th prophet. We now have 10 temples in operation, construction, or announced in California as of this last conference, and 7 in Texas. I don't need to go through the whole thing. The time is now. Spiritual momentum, 17 minutes and 17 seconds. It's too much. It's just. Oh, and by the way, this is just for fun, but this was a really good movie, by the way. Bill and Ted Face the Music. I think that the other side of this, okay, Satan, his followers, his earthly followers, I think that they're aware of the time that we're living in as well. They're not going to use it as a way to prepare people to change. They want to try and do as much damage as possible, but it's like I don't know how to describe it, but it seems like they put a lot of this kind of imagery in movies and TV shows. And one thing that I've noticed, for example, we've been watching the Marvel movies. We watched all of them, me and my wife and one of my daughters, and then we're going back through and watching them again because there's so many details in it, and it's entertaining. But they put a lot of actually really heavy themes in there. You may not think so. You may just look at those movies as just brainless comic book movies, superhero movies, but they put really, really heavy stuff in there if you know what you're looking at. And they've been doing a lot of stuff that has to do with the end of the world, the end of the universe, and they usually make the God figure the bad guy. Okay, so the one that's ending the world is the bad guy. It's almost like they're trying to condition people so that when Christ comes, those that remain will view him as an alien or an intruder, a bad guy, a dictator. Okay, I'm not going to go through like every single example, and they also throw in a lot of very religious imagery in these movies. There's a lot of use of the word "I am," which is a title for God. They talk a lot about the last days. In Age of Ultron, it gets really explicit where he's like, on this rock I will build my church, and uh, he has like this flying city that he's going to use to destroy the world. But you have a flying city imagery, which makes you think of Enoch and returning to their. You just have to watch them. It's just littered all throughout the movies and the series. So I think that the point is that Satan is directing his work. Some of these people may not be aware really of what they're doing or what they're putting in the movies. But one interesting thing here that kind of goes along with what we're talking about, um, if you don't know the story, so spoilers, okay? If you haven't seen these movies, spoilers. Um, so what it is that Bill and Ted, they're supposed to basically, uh, they create, in the first movie, they're told that they're going to create this song that's going to unify humanity. And because of this song, that's just so epic, it ends up turning Earth into like a utopian type society. Well, in the third movie, and you don't have to have watched the first two to enjoy this one. By the way, I do recommend that you watch this because it was really well done. But they're now they're now old. They're like middle aged men, and they're still trying to come up with the perfect song. And they get a message from the future that if they don't have this song done by a specific time, that the world's going to end. That all of reality, not just the world, but all of reality is going to end. It says here, the great leader tells them that they have until 7:17 p.m. that night to write the song, or reality will collapse. Sorry, that cracks me up. That's my type of humor. Um, so it's just interesting that they specifically chose that 7:17. Sometimes I wonder if Satan is telling his earthly followers that there's a way to escape this. We've had these like billionaires that have been launching into space with their private space flights, and you have to wonder if they think that in some way they can escape what's coming by literally by literally leaving the Earth. Um, there's also a lot of other stuff. I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't want to be that type of channel. But I feel like there's a lot of fingerprints throughout movies, throughout society. Just if you watch the news, you watch movies, you notice that there's themes. And so anyway, that's just for fun. Okay, that's going to be it for this one. Hopefully, gave you some things to think about. Uh, I mean, in light of all these things, I have to think that President Nelson is special. I think that he's really special. I don't know if he's going to be the prophet of the second coming, but I feel like if it's not him, it's going to be the next one, which will probably be President Oaks. Um, 17 being the number of completion. It very well may be that we're seeing the completion of this dispensation, of the time that we had, 200 plus years to restore the church, build it up as big as possible. We now have, by the way, here's another one. Um, let's see. What is the total LDS membership. This is another 17. As of right now, this is Wikipedia. I'd rather go to an actual article. Well, this is from 2021. Whatever. It's let's just go with this. 16.8 million. 16.8 million. That's how many members we have. And what is that really close to? If we round it up, what would that be? 17 million. It would be 17 million. 17 million members over the course, or at least that's those that are currently alive right now. That's what we got up to over the course of 200 years. More than 200 years. And by the way, this is about how many Jews there are in the world. How many Jews are there in the world? I've always found this kind of stunning. It's actually more. There's only about 15.2 million Jews. So we're very similar in size. Think about the Bible, and think about when Israel split into two nations. You had Judah in the south, and then all the rest were the northern kingdom. I don't know what the population broke down into, like if it was like pretty even, or if Judah had a lot more or more. But whatever the case, it's an interesting parallel, isn't it? It's like we have Judah today at 15.2, and now we have all the rest of the other tribes together at almost 17 million. If you just look at the membership number, that by itself almost says completion, the end. I don't know what else to say. It's all too perfect. All we can really do is see what actually happens. A date that I'm looking at right now. We pulled this up. I've brought this up a number of times on the channel. Where is it? Jewish feast? No, Judaism, Hebrew calendar, customize, Omer count. Okay, create calendar. So today is the 3rd of May. The 3rd of May is it's the 17th day of the Omer count. Today is the 17th day. Today is the 17th day of the Omer count. Of course it is. Of course it is. So we're counting up to 50. On the 50th day, you arrive at Pentecost, or otherwise known as Shavuot, or the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of the Harvest. This is the one that's associated a lot with the wheat harvest, and it's associated with late spring, early summer. You have a bunch of parables from the New Testament that associate that time of year with the second coming. So I'm not saying that anything's going to happen on these days, but we've noted before that things do, in our dispensation, still happen on these Jewish feast days. If we go over here, and we go to, let's go to this tracker that I'm currently putting together. So if you go back to the year, where is it? If you go back to the year 1836, on the 3rd of April, this is when Elijah came to the Kirtland Temple. He came on first fruits. Even though first fruits was already, fulfilled by Christ by being resurrected, it's like Elijah or the Lord wanted him to come on first fruits. This is during the Passover week, by the way. First fruits is part of the Passover week. And then we know that Joseph Smith, he received the gold plates on Rosh Hashanah, or the Feast of Trumpets. So that's what makes me believe that significant events could still happen on these days. So this year, we're in a sabbatical year, or a Shemitah, which only happens once every 7 years. Passover started on Saturday, which is the same day that it started during the last week of Christ's life. And this year, first fruits and Easter, they were both on the 17th. They were both on the 17th this year. See, that's why I have it all highlighted all green, all the way from here to here. This was kind of a special year. This happened once before in 2015, but then before 2015, you have to go all the way back to 1938. And in 1938, guess what? It was on the 17th of April. And then before 1938, you have to go back to 1924, and then 1917, right? Of course, 1917. How could there not be one of these happenings in 1917? Before 1917, you don't have any others. At least going back to 1800. So from the year 1800 to 1917, you don't have any of these times where it's a Shemitah and first fruits and Easter and Passover starts on Saturday. For like 117 years, you don't see that. And now, coming up to our own time, we've had one in 2015. We're currently in one right now. The next one is going to happen in 2029. And you guys, this may not mean anything. It really may not mean anything. But it also could. So these are just times to maybe look at. And what could happen is, for example, what if the Lord wants to have, what if he wants to have Adam on Pentecost, right? Pentecost celebrates when Israel became betrothed to the Lord. So wouldn't it make sense that maybe on that same day, the marriage would take place? Because the betrothal period went for a year, so why not? Why not have the marriage on the same day as the betrothal on Pentecost? It could happen. You know, I don't know for sure that Adam on Diamond is the marriage, but it kind of makes sense to me because all of his covenant people, the righteous, are going to be there. That's going to be the first time that we see him as a body. That's where he's going to receive the keys back, and that's where he's officially going to take his place. So it's just like a marriage. It's like the husband becoming the husband, entering that marriage contract. So it could happen this year. Could happen next year on Shavuot. We'll just have to wait and see. There may also be other events that we don't even know about that are not in the scriptures that are supposed to happen. I don't think that everything that's going to happen is in the scriptures. There's probably going to be things that are planned that are supposed to happen, but we just don't have knowledge of it at this time. It'll be revealed, as it happens. So there could be other things that happen on these days. So it's so much to think about. It really is. It's so much to think about. We're living in very exciting times. It really seems to me like 17 actually means something, that it has significance to us right now. I think that it's no mistake that President Nelson is the 17th. He really might represent the perfection and completeness of this dispensation. And again, we pointed out how it's perfect that he's a heart doctor. He's working on the heart of Zion, because to be a Zion people, we have to be pure of heart. We have to be one of heart, one of mind. Who better than to have a metaphorical doctor, an actual doctor, metaphorically working on the heart of the church, right? So maybe he'll be the end, and then President Oaks, maybe he'll be the beginning of the millennium. He'll be the political person that helps Christ establish the political kingdom, the laws, and so forth. Maybe when President Nelson dies, maybe that's like the final end. And then President Oaks will be the one that greets Christ when he comes. There is an interesting thing. Sorry, this is the video that just won't stop, I guess. There is an interesting thing that I noticed. Let's see. There's going to be an eclipse next year. Eclipse 2023. Let me see if I can find that website that I was looking at. Okay. Map. I need to find... Wait, sorry, let me do Google Map. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so look at this. Look at this. This is next year, 2023. I don't know the day. Okay, hold on. When is the 2023 eclipse? It's going to be Saturday, which is a Sabbath for the Jews, October 14th. Let's see if there's a Jewish feast day at that time. October... What was it? October 14th. October 14th. No. But that'll be a week... excuse me. That'll be about a week after the Feast of Tabernacles. Anyway, so let's look at this map. I was looking at this yesterday. And what we have here is kind of interesting. I'm not going to read too much into it. But this is the direction of the eclipse. It goes like this. Okay, it's going to go through Utah. Although it's not going to go over Salt Lake City or anything. But it's going to go over, the middle of the state. And then it's going to go through Albuquerque. Okay, it's going to go through the Albuquerque metro area, essentially. Albuquerque means white oak. Okay, think of President Oaks, white oak. And then it's going to come down here. It's going to continue. So it's interesting because it's going from the west coast down into the Gulf of Mexico. And the last place that it's going to go is Corpus Christi. And Corpus Christi means body of Christ, or Christ body, or the body of Christ. So that's kind of interesting. It's going through Oaks, right? White Oak, Albuquerque. It's going from Utah to White Oak to the body of Christ. And that's where it ends, for as far as like it being over land. Well, except for it does continue down here into the Yucatan Peninsula, and then into... Go away. And then into these Central American countries, and it's going to come down into South America as well. So, but if you're looking at just the path of the United States, that's where it ends, is at Corpus Christi. So that's probably looking too much into it, but just something to maybe think about. Okay, that is going to be it. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, put your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share this because it's just fascinating. I feel like people should probably know this, especially those that are really watching for the signs of the times. I think this is kind of important to realize, and I'll talk to you guys later.